Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 8, Episode 8. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice. We are excited to have Project Voice 2023 about a month and a half away. It's getting a little closer. We are in the process of releasing the charter, the draft of the Ethics and Integrity Charter around LLM-based AI that the Conversational AI Leadership Council will review and then sign at the conference. That's hot off the presses. We got a lot of things moving. It's exciting times for this space, and it's a great time to come together with a great panel of really accomplished folks. So thank you for paying attention to the show and watching if you're watching on YouTube or listening if you're on your podcast provider of choice. Marty, I'm going to start with you in terms of introductions. Tell us who you are. Tell us who you're with.
Sure. Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Marty Sarum. I wear actually a couple of hats, but I'll kind of start with, I run a micro fund called Caria Venture Partners. We're a deep tech stack, primarily focused in call center startups. So if you think about just early stage companies that are coming out with, whether it's voice or text or any type of automation, augmentation tools for kind of the call center world, I like to write the first checks in those companies. And so my background is operations, been in the contact center space the last couple of decades. So I kind of see it from a ops level, and I'm not a techie by trade, but my partner is, and we found kind of our niche in doing startup and call center type restructures of tech stack. So one of the companies I invested in that I'm spending a lot of time is with a company called Sonus. Sonus is the world's first and only algorithm that phonetically maps speech in real time. So if you think about anyone speaking with an accent, I can actually convert that accent into a North American accent if they're Indian or they're Filipino and they want to sound like the local listener. We can convert that in real time via some algorithms, and so so I'm spending a lot of time on that, and thought it was a kind of a good intro into This Week in Voice, as it's a very techie voice product. So appreciate Bradley, you inviting me, and nice to meet all of you.
Marty, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for giving us some of your time. Next up, we have Greg Bennett from Salesforce. Greg, say hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Bradley. And it's great to be here. I'm Greg. I lead the conversation design practice at Salesforce. My team and I were responsible for helping our customers scale their own conversational solutions for their customers. We operate across a handful of different industries, including but not limited to sales, service, education, etc. And I really am excited for this because it's such a watershed moment in the time of conversational AI and conversation design. A lot of the things that we've wanted to do from a design perspective are now much more tangible and at our fingertips, thanks to the evolution that we have seen in large language models. So excited to dive in and provide the design perspective.
Excellent. Greg, thank you for joining us. Next up, we have JP from SmartBots. JP, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
And pronounce your full name for us. I am born and raised in the South, so it takes me longer to do everything, including understand names, but give us your full name. Tell us all about SmartBots.
Sure. My full name is Jayaprakash, but very few people know my full name. I go by JP wherever I interact. And I am the co-founder at SmartBots. And I'm based in Hyderabad, India, which is the southern part of India. It's a beautiful city. And our headquarters is in Dallas, Texas. So I keep moving between India, US most of the time. And SmartBots, we have been working in the conversational AI space for the past 5 years, building chat and voice bots for large enterprises. And this knowledge, whatever we have accumulated, we have converted that into a studio, which is going to be launched in April, next April 26th to be precise. And some other interesting work that we have done is with Amazon. We have partnered with Amazon, and we have co-developed a few industry use cases. We have developed and published them on Amazon, along with the Amazon Lex team. So that by far has been one of our greatest works we have done so far. and few other interesting enterprise implementations. So that's briefly about what SmartBots is.
It's great to have you on the show. Thank you for giving us some of your time. Next up, we have Daniel Lackland of Ai4. Daniel, say hello.
Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. Brad, thanks so much for letting me come on the show. Super excited to be here. By way of introduction, my name is Daniel Lackland. I am Director of Content at Ai4, which is an event organizer. We focus on organizing a big event once a year that focuses on AI for industry use cases. So, for example, we cover really everything from government to finance and banks to hospitals, all sorts of use cases, both from a business and technical perspective. And my role is basically to curate the agenda and just focus on what we teach people. So, this conversation is super relevant. We're really interested in all sorts of conversational AI technologies. And yeah, we're just super, super excited to be here. I think that's everything. I'm currently sitting in Medellin, Colombia. We're a remote company, so I'm doing some traveling. And yeah, excited for the conversation.
Yeah, it's great to have you be part. And yes, we do like to have other event organizers on here from other times. I don't like being called an event organizer. I don't view myself as one. Other people do it better than we do. And y'all would be included in that. Thank you for taking the time to be part of the show with us. Last but not least, Chris Morrow of Amazon. Chris, say hello.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chris Morrow. I'm a senior product manager of tech products at Amazon. I've worked in Alexa in a variety of verticals from since about 2018. So I've seen a lot in that space as it's matured. I started in entertainment use cases. I worked in the interactive fiction category, launching a few of the things that sort of decorate the walls behind me. And for the last 2 years, I've been running the books category for Alexa Shopping. So around the sort of purchasing, acquisition, and discovery use cases for the intersection of kind of interactive voice and retail. So really excited to be here. These are some great topics. I'm pretty excited to talk about and hear what the panel has to say.
Chris, always good to have you here. Thank you for making the time as well. Look, great panel. Appreciate all of y'all. And with that, we'll get to the news. So story number one from Futurism. This is the first time that we have used this news source in 8 seasons, but an interesting publication. Chaos inside Google as execs try to figure out how to actually use AI. That's good. Now I remember why I selected this article and put it first. Interesting piece. It's an intense time. This article goes through and I'm not going to say it paints an incredibly flattering picture of Google, which good. But there's a lot of things in here that I think are there's a lot of meat on the bones to this article, and I'm going to go in the same order that we did the introductions in. So Marty, I'm going to start with you. Interesting piece here. I think really well written. What, if anything, what stood out to you about this article?
I mean, it's not surprising, right? I think we've seen the emergence of technology and some of this AI, moving at such a speed that not everyone can keep up, and it's moving in a bunch of different directions. And being in early stage, I kind of see it a little bit ahead of the rest of the world, and it's really something to just kind of. It's hard to keep up with, right? And I think too many people are generalists in a lot, and no one's really focused in kind of specific domains. And so, I saw that article and I just kind of chuckled as you did, because, but to me, it's really not. It didn't shock me, and I think that truth be told, I think there's a lot more than that than comes out publicly. So.
Is Google, and I'll ask you this too, and then I'll ask the same 2 questions of everybody. Is Google, how do I want to phrase this? How competitive is Google going to be with Google Bard to ChatGPT and other competitors in this space? Are they well positioned for the moment, or are they as poorly positioned as this article would let on? In your thoughts, Marty?
Well, it's Google, right? So you can't ever understand Google. They're well capitalized. They have plenty of brain power. I think they're possibly caught off guard a little bit when ChatGPT came out, and with the whole OpenAI and Microsoft's bid, I think that forced them to react quickly. And you saw, I don't know if all of you guys saw that, but when they released Bard, it wasn't necessarily the best Google type release. And I think that was done very quickly, as evidenced by kind of the flop and whatever. So I think they're in, I think they called it like code red or something inside Google, if I remember. And so, look, they're going to be fine. Like, they're going to be fine. They'll figure it out. They're Google. Like, you can't underestimate Google, but it's been fascinating to watch them get challenged like I haven't seen before. So.
All right, so that's a decided vote of confidence in Google's corner, and it'll be interesting to see how that stacks up with the panel. Greg, I'm going to ask you the same question. What, if anything, stood out to you about this piece, and how relatively well positioned or not is Google for this moment we're in?
Sure. I mean, I have to say, in reading the entire article, in retrospect, the title feels a little clickbaity, mostly just because I think that the sort of discussion that happened, that they covered in the article, felt pretty reasonable, I think. I personally, in the advent of ChatGPT and everyone kind of saying like, "Ooh, it's going to replace search," I had the same question of, it has a factual accuracy sort of weakness, and search is about finding that accurate, pinpointed answer. So why on earth would we use GPT or a large language model to replace search when that has, a sort of fundamental lacking, if you will? So, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that I am terribly surprised, just because I think that, from a media perspective, there's a lot of catching up that a lot of folks are doing across the board. If anything, I do feel that, the recent discussions around large language models is kind of pressure testing the extent of everyone's knowledge around AI, which I think is totally fair. People learn at different paces. That's all great. But when it comes particularly conversational AI, I think it is important to stay with the facts and zero in on the fact that, large language models do have an accuracy challenge, if you will. And so from that perspective, I agree. I don't think that large language models are a replacement for search. If anything, I think it's important to think through the augmentation of how it can be used for what it's good at. Large language models are really good at content generation. And so I believe in all organizations to really kind of figure out how they want to best apply that. And for what it's worth, they have been in the space of conversational AI and AI in general for like over 20 years. So I can't assume that, just because, there are some perceived weaknesses around large language modeling, that, it's, maybe not ready. I think that they probably are. It's just a matter of the market itself has to figure out what it wants. Right now, I don't think the market knows what it wants. I think the market is searching for buzzwords, and looking for potential upsets across other markets. And that's really where I think this article kind of came from.
No, that's an empathetic view toward Google. That's a friendly view, is what that is. I would agree that a lot of people don't know what, who. It's interesting, sort of, implicit in your response was, we really don't know where this is headed. Like, all of this stuff is not in final form, and it's easy to forget that. And whatever the final form is, maybe Google is better positioned for that than we've given them credit for. I thought that was really interesting. JP, same question to you. Your thought on the piece, and then just in your estimation, how well or poorly positioned Google is for this moment.
Sure. I mean, we have been discussing the business point of view, like the race between Google, Microsoft. And if you purely look from the business perspective, I see that Google definitely did rush into this, but I want to give a different perspective on from the technology standpoint. Search as such, as the other people here have mentioned, search is a different problem, and generative AI, the technology behind generative AI is different. So we are trying to compare in search we have page ranking. Page ranking is not just an algorithm, but it is 2 decades of ranking which we humans have done without our knowledge. We have been linking pages, correct? So that knowledge is already there in the search engine. Whereas on the other side, we have generative AI, which is trying to make use of a different approach. It has digested a lot of data, a lot of language, and it is trying to predict the next one. Now we are trying to force fit search on top of, we are trying to force fit this generative AI for a search problem. So I don't think that from a technology standpoint, it would be working as replacing ChatGPT or any generative model with a page ranking kind of algorithm. But what I see is a middle ground where the core of the search would still be page ranking, and the interface would be generative AI based, so that the experience is going to be more conversational for the end user, but driven by the page ranking. I'm just speculating. I'm assuming this is how Google would be thinking and waiting, and then with so much of experience it has in search, it is going to solve the search problem. We are all fed up with the 10 links which are seen on Google page, so it has to get conversational.
So again, so that's three in the Google on the Google scoreboard. Y'all love yourself some behemoths, which I think is predictable judging from the background of the panel. No, I agree. Look, I mean, I think Google, the article is a little, I think clickbaity, just to go back to an earlier comment, is probably right. And the, JP, I thought what you said is interesting, because obviously you see some middle ground in there as you described. I thought that was interesting. Daniel, I'm going to go to you, and then Chris to you. Same question. Google, are they should they be written off like this article would clearly love to do, or are they in better position than maybe we've accounted for? And any other thoughts on the piece?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I love everyone's answer so far. I'm super interested in this personally. I'm sure this will be a very rambling response, but yeah, JP, also, I have no idea if I personally even want, from a search perspective, to be interacting with a conversational AI bot, or, have a list of search results. And I'm super interested to see where that goes. So these articles honestly made me think about just like the boom and bust cycle of technology as a whole. I think with like the virality of AI lately, I mean, I'm an AI event organizer, for crying out loud. And I even sort of think, as painful as it might be to see a bit of like a sort of slowing, I think it could be helpful, because I think, we're seeing such craze around all these different technologies and all this excitement. And I think, that is basically why you have what appears to be like a C-suite level meeting meant to address concerns about how this stuff is going to be used, where the answer is like, we don't know. You know what I mean? And I mean, it's absurd, but I think, that is why. I think that's why there's such craze. And, we're sort of like, I think, ignoring that sort of age-old idea around entrepreneurship and just doing anything hard in the first place, which is, it's often very helpful to just start with a business problem instead of starting with the cool, new, exciting AI or piece of technology more broadly. And so I think that's what's going on. I think that's why this article was able to basically roast, all these great people who are doing cool things, because it's unclear how this technology is going to be used. So yeah, it's very exciting. I had another thought. Yeah, that was really it. And then, yeah, is Google positioned well? I'm actually going to take a contrarian view. I think, historically speaking, even though Google is a bit of an anomaly because they're, so focused on, R&D, I think, you see the most impactful innovation happen at a smaller level historically in business as a whole. And even though they're really well equipped with, lots of resources, in this setting, I don't think they're super clear on exactly what's going to be helpful. I think that really the way they're positioned most successfully is in search, as JP said. But I think that, unless that ends up being the most useful thing that, LLMs can deliver for society, and I'm not sure that that's the case at all. I think actually there probably will be other organizations that solve a more important problem eventually with it. So anyway, that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. Yeah, because that's sort of in parallel to an earlier thought. We really don't know what the problems, the full scope of the problems are that these LLMs will ultimately be able to solve, to the accuracy level that we want. Chris, I'm coming to you for the last word on this. You got a unique point of view, just being part of the Alexa team. But from where you sit, how does Google look to you? You think it's all a bit overblown, or you think they're in some sort of jeopardy?
As I read the article, I concur. I mean, it seems like a journalistic piece capturing a moment in time during crisis management. I think if you were to take an hour-long meeting from any period of any product I've ever launched, a week before launch, the product, the headline would be something like "Everything's on fire, bugs everywhere." I mean, it's that sort of, there are moments in crisis where if you take that snapshot and that's the storyline, I mean, I think that to me, it felt a little bit like, okay, but what was the 2 weeks leading up to this? And then let's see what's the, what happens over the next 6 months. To me, I think fundamentally, I do think Google is well positioned. I mean, I think because to me, OpenAI's, the ChatGPT's success demonstrates that we haven't finished evolving the way that humans interact with computers, and that there is a lot of appetite for an easier, more casual way to interact with a computer and to get an output from the computer. And to me, that's what the question is around. And I agree with some of the earlier comments around the solution is probably not pure LLM for LLM's sake. It's probably a combination, but the overall lesson being, this is a shift potentially in the way that, we are enabling humans to interact with technology. And I'll say that, I always go back to, I was in this talking to a friend of mine, in the book, The Innovator's Dilemma. And, to me, this feels like that moment of the innovator's dilemma where, where the incumbents are probably going to choose acquisition, they choose acquisition or be disrupted. Because I think that's why we're seeing some of the reactivity, in the rushed launch with Bard. I mean, that's a bummer. $100 billion bummer, I think. And some of that reactivity being, what do we, what's the problem? Not being clear on what's the problem we're solving. I do think where it could fail, or potentially could end up being a metaverse type, type moment of, if the approach is we need to find the use case that's scalable, that becomes a pillar of the business, and don't, work backwards from what's the customer value.
It's interesting to think about, we talked a little bit on the show about this last week, and it's come up a couple times this season, where there's this trend in tech to get smaller. And you've had, different approaches to this. You've had Elon Musk to explicitly state, we're going back to startup mode. You've had other companies be more opaque about, not really revealing that they're going back to startup mode, but they're going back to startup mode. It's interesting just to view Google from that lens, because it's almost like there's Newtonian physics involved, where they've kind of been a body at rest for a while, and are they able to get back into like a wartime mindset? And I've actually the next new, not to plug the newsletter, but the next newsletter is going to address this. There's going to be, I'm seeing in this space, it's time for a different mindset being brought to the table, and a different level of competitiveness. And I'm talking startups to big tech, everybody in between, than maybe what this conversational AI space was used to. Because like Chris, you're a perfect example. You go back 4 years ago or 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, to the Alexa team, and you say, hey, describe to me how Alexa is better than Google Assistant. I actually did this. There was a conference over in Europe that Amazon and Google were both co-presenting on Alexa and Google Assistant. I was like, the hell is this? And they're like, oh, well, why wouldn't this be the case? So, and both sides, it was tough to pull out a negative word, about from one to the other. And I think there's a time and a place for that level of collegiality, but I think what I see out of this and this piece, it is a little clickbaity, but to me, it's a bit of a sign that the tone and the atmosphere of the whole technological domain is shifting, and it's a much more competitive space now. And I think that's probably for everybody's, probably for the best for everybody involved. Any closing thoughts on this piece before we move on? No, those were great. Those were great comments. Next up, haven't featured a Seeking Alpha article in a while, but really love their work. The headline is Amazon, Alexa troubles, but deeply undervalued intrinsically. So that's not the easiest to read bunch of words, but this article really dives in deep on Amazon, and paints an interesting picture. And Chris, I'm going to start with you and go in reverse. Might as well start off with our Amazon representation here, before we get to people who will speak with greater transparency on the topic. You've worked for Amazon for a while, them inside and out. Your thoughts on this piece?
Well, obviously there is a significant body of the piece that I will just leave untouched. I do think that where the article talked about one, not walking away from Alexa. I think that was there was a question, I think earlier this, or maybe it was kind of late last year, there was some press around are we walking away from Alexa, and that that certainly not being the case. But then this other, sort of the next piece around the experimentation, and are we willing to what extent are we willing to experiment? And the answer is we have a healthy appetite for experimentation, always looking for that, what is that, kind of that customer value. But I do think that now there's more, at least from, I think from what I'm seeing, there's more focus than there was, I think you kind of remember, back in the 2018, 2019, just kind of trying everything. I think what I'm seeing is that there's more focus on what are the sort of the successful use cases. I'll probably leave it there.
No, that's great. And I appreciate you being willing to say that much. So yeah, it's an interesting piece, and I think you nailed it. We all remember, and I think it was to Amazon's credit, trying everything from, I still have my Echo buttons. You remember the Echo buttons? To all, they experimented. Amazon was willing to experiment not just with features like software side stuff, but hardware side stuff too. And I said for, you can go back and there's probably 50 examples of this on the show, of me saying something to the effect of Amazon does not get credit nearly enough for that fearlessness. And I think it will actually serve them well moving forward. I appreciate those comments. Daniel, I'm going to go to you and then continue to work backward through the previous order. This is an interesting piece. Amazon is in a strange position where they are the underdog. Nobody's talking about them. They're off the radar. That's super strange. I want to get your thoughts on the piece and just how it struck you.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a few things going on here from my perspective. I think it's too early. First of all, the article refers to, different conversational AI technologies as like first generation, second generation. And I kind of struggled with that and thought, it's a little early to kind of know what's going to happen in this sort of language model race that we're in. I also think it's kind of interesting that, the product of Alexa is being undervalued by certain groups, whether it's in Amazon or outside. And yet, people are obsessed, like I kind of said earlier, with this, these pieces of technology, these tools that aren't even products, you know what I mean? And I think that's kind of says something, although what it is, I'm still figuring out, I would say. But yeah, I think, Amazon was an early pioneer in this space. And, Chris works on, it's like the most Amazon, Chris, you work on the most Amazon thing that Amazon does, right? Voice, using Alexa to buy books, right? It started as a bookstore, it's kind of this like pure ideologically Amazonian, thing that you do. And it works, it's a valuable thing that people can use. And it helps, bring people back as a marketing tool to Amazon instead of using a competitor. So I think, there's a lot of value there. And I think, once again, my basic opinion is that in this gigantic large language model race, I think a lot of companies are basically putting the cart before the horse.
So yeah, and good call on pointing out that Chris is a true blood. That's a really interesting point. I really hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It's Amazon on top of Amazon with a sprinkle of Amazon on top. JP, I'm coming to you. Interesting piece here from Seeking Alpha just on where Amazon is. Want to get your thoughts.
Sure. The article here talks about two parts. I would like to separate them, Alexa in trouble and then the deeply undervalued concept, right? So deeply undervalued, I frankly don't have an opinion. I'm not able to interpret anything from that part of the section, but being a techie, I would like to focus more on Alexa's trouble. And what I feel is, let us look at without the LLM and the ChatGPTs of the world as such, Alexa in its natural growth is dependent on, say, the retail business. The way Alexa was started was to promote the retail business. So that would act as a channel for more business flowing onto the retail channel. I think that kind of a approach for getting more business into retail is questionable because conversational AI or this kind of interfaces are not solutions for every kind of a problem. Meaning conversational AI fits only in few places, like getting an idea to get more business through voice into the retail channel is something which I doubt. Instead, the focus of Alexa, if it shifts, I believe to tell my view, it is in trouble. And to get back, Alexa should be focusing on increasing the number of conversations which people have. Right now, you have only one turn. You just ask, what is the weather like? You don't continuously converse. If that depth of conversation increases, and that will convert to more business, I believe the number of increasing number of interactions with Alexa will increase the business. So yes, I feel it is in trouble, keeping aside the recession impact or keeping aside the LLM impact. As such, it has to be on its own and should survive on number of transactions.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to phrase that. The more turns in the conversation that it generates, the more economically viable it's going to be to within the company and externally. I think that's interesting. Daniel, I'm coming to you. Not you, Daniel. Greg, I'm coming to you and then to Marty to close us out on the story. Want to get your thoughts. Interesting piece, covers a lot of ground. Your thoughts on Amazon?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that stood out to me, I mean, I'm sure you all are aware, like I operate mostly in a B2B space. And so what they're referring to in this article has a lot to do with B2C use cases, which I think are frankly difficult in their own right and in a very different way than for B2B. And I really draw sort of, it reminded me of, sort of my days in linguistics, sort of studying how people communicate between each other. And if there's anything I've learned from that, it's that language is playful, that humans like to play with language. It is the, conversation is the fabric with, or the currency with which we sew the fabric of humanity, and I think that for voice assistants in particular, LLMs kind of lend themselves quite well to that. If there's anything that we saw around all of the public discourse around ChatGPT, people were playing with it. People are trying to figure out, hey, write me a limerick about the new Marvel movie, and what's to say that people wouldn't be able to do that with a voice assistant? If I'm going to go visit my dad, who also has one of these devices, and he asks it to play fart sounds, you know, what's to say that people wouldn't be able to say those things verbally as well as, not just via chat? And I think to sort of plus one what you had said, JP, the large language models in the intersection with voice assistants kind of give us that turn-taking depth that previously was really expensive to create. But now, if you're kind of leveraging the best of what a large language model can produce, you get that depth of turn-taking, you get that deeper interaction that you could potentially have for a playful and fun use case. I think the challenge is, as you're sort of working on the experimentation around it, is finding the monetization of that use case. So, potentially you could use the large language model to help deepen turn taking around giving advice or suggesting a particular product. But all of that really depends on the integration of that model with your system, with your inventory, with all of the data that sits there. And that introduces so many more questions about privacy and IP. But I do think that sort of zeroing in, like Chris, like you said, on these focused use cases and figuring out what benefit are we going to give the user? Is the benefit play? Because that has its own benefit, and can we figure out how to monetize that and then work backwards from there? One of the things that I feel like I'm noticing in the industry right now is I feel like everyone is trying to just plug every appliance they have into a socket as quickly as possible for the sake of just trying to maybe, stay competitive, stay relevant without actually thinking of like what benefit is that to the user. And maybe that's just because my background is in design. And so I always think of, okay, what is this going to do for the user? But what happens when you plug in all your appliances, you overload the breaker, you run up your power bill, thinking about how we're going to use this tool and for what ends, and therefore how do we monetize it? I think working backwards from there, and Daniel, I think you had alluded to this a little bit earlier, that's really where I think the success will come.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. Amazon did almost everything. They did so many things right, but and they had some commerce driving through Alexa, right? In the before times. Is that what we're going to call before ChatGPT? Or maybe we call it before the pandemic. Either way, in the before times, Amazon did some things right with commerce, but not enough. And I don't think it takes any rocket scientist to realize there's conversations going on in that company to figure out, okay, when we show back up again to this party, how do we improve upon that? Marty, I'm coming up to you for the last word on this piece. Interesting piece. Your take.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll speak on the valuation side, I think, and some of the comments that were made earlier. I think it's fascinating to watch not just Amazon, but all these tech companies, these big tech companies scaling down and going into kind of startup mode. And that's what's built these businesses, right? As an operator, I'm hard hat, lunch pail, go to work, roll up the sleeves. So I'm always in startup mode. And I think what we're seeing now is these massive layoffs of tens of thousands of people. Everyone's going, oh my God, what's going to happen? Well, there was so much bloat because of valuation, right? Funds were raising, valuations were going crazy. Like it had to stop at some point. And teams were, people within organizations just thought, hey, everybody else is scaling teams, so I might as well scale teams. And you create this massive layer of just I don't know, call it red tape in an organization that you can't quite move and you can't be as innovative and some of that stuff. And so, kind of going back to Amazon, like, they grow, I think 20% quarter over quarter. Like, that's not bad. I'll take that all day long. Not to be a fan of all the big FANG companies, but again, it's Amazon. So tough to bet against a company like Amazon. And then I think, Bradley, you mentioned, taking bets and taking shots. They take a lot of them, and a lot of, like, when you take that many bets, you can't always be right. Like, no one can always be right. And they've been right way more than anyone's given them credit for. So it's like, I believe in like the smart speaker concept, and somebody said earlier about how humans interact with AI in a more friendlier way and that kind of thing. I believe in that concept, and so the people can laugh at that and say, oh, it's a silly idea, but there's a whole bunch of other stories that were silly ideas that people laughed at that no one believed in, and they turned out to be successful. So again, like, between valuation, like in terms of dollars, nobody knows, are we at the bottom? Where is valuations in kind of tech companies? No one knows. Like, obviously it was way frothy last year. This year's a correction, perhaps next year's another correction. We don't know, but yeah, again, like, Amazon's valued pretty nicely, positioned pretty nicely, and they're working on some big things that they only got to get a couple of them right to continue to hit their trajectory. And again, I'm a believer in that. So yeah.
No, yeah, no, your points are well taken. You're right. You're just touching on the valuations for a minute. The market, when you overlay the macroeconomic conditions of the last few years and the flux of it all, on top of the velocity of change with the underlying technology that all of us are working with conversational AI, it's been confusing. It's get the map and compass out and get your abacus out, and let's try to figure out what it is we need to be doing, and to the extent we need to be doing it. It's been a strange time. And I think that your comments really, touched on that. It's great comments all the way around. But I think the ultimate takeaway is y'all like your big tech. This panel likes this big tech. I'll keep that in mind. I want to make sure we got enough time. We got 10 minutes left. I want to close with this article from the New York Times. And I will mention, when I sent this article out, it was not paywalled. And then now when I click on it again, it's paywalled, but it really doesn't matter. I'll paraphrase the article. It's called A New MASH Scene, written by ChatGPT, read by Hawkeye and BJ. So this is a New York Times article that, just to paraphrase, it's ruminating on the future of content, media and entertainment in the ChatGPT LLM AI era. And MASH was not a show that I watched by choice. One set of my grandparents decided that having that on the TV was a good idea, so I was exposed to that at different points in the past, unfortunately. I'm being harsh, but Marty, I'm going to start with you and go through the original order. The nuts and bolts of this piece are kind of secondary. I really just want to ask you, I'll say one more thing. So I'm watching Picard right now on Paramount Plus, and the reason I'm watching that, I grew up watching Star Trek Next Generation, which is my favorite show of all time, and the opportunity to see Patrick Stewart and some of the old actors participate in this storyline, in this universe one more time, is too good to pass up. And I think the prospect, the potential, some of it at least, with ChatGPT and the like, is to have universes that extend far beyond what the humans involved are ever capable of delivering. So my question for you and the rest of the panel would be, how do you view the future of media and entertainment in this ChatGPT era? Do you think ChatGPT is a threat to entertainment and a threat to the monetization, or do you view it as just sort of a fantastic extension and a huge revenue windfall for them? Your thoughts?
With 8 minutes left only, this is quite a topic that I'm sure we could go in a bunch of directions, but I'll just quickly say, like, I think the short answer to your question is nobody knows, right? Every day ChatGPT is doing a use case that people aren't thinking about, and it has multiple ripple effects, whether it's infringement or whether it's recreating music and movies and this MASH show. And I wasn't a MASH fan, or I never watched MASH, but so I didn't watch this one, but we just don't know. And we don't know we won't know for, I don't know, maybe a couple of years, because as it creates things that go beyond what we can even imagine, it's going to have rippling effects. And then it brings up the ethics conversation, and then it brings up the monetization, who gets credit for what, how do you you use my information. It's the flip between search engine and answer engine. And there's so much to be said about if you can ask something, if you can ask the question and you get the response, and it can build, and think about like taking pictures and taking that and putting that all into text to pictures and feeding that through the models and all of that. So short answer, I don't know, man.
We'll accept that. We accept that around here. Greg, I'm coming to you. So you heard Marty's ruminating on the topic. Want to ask you, is ChatGPT and the ChatGPT era good for entertainment or bad for entertainment?
I don't work in entertainment, so I can't say for sure. But what I will say, as someone who works in conversation design, has been asked a similar question, like, is ChatGPT good or bad for us? I mean, I can imagine that, producing content is a challenge, an expensive one at that, in the entertainment industry. And so I think it's important to think through like how GPT or any other large language model can be an enhancement tool. I wasn't able to see sort of like the quality of the MASH episode. I think I might go back to ChatGPT and ask them to write a Golden Girls episode personally, and then really judge and find out, okay, how good are you? Because as a massive fan of that show, I hope you get it right. But all that to say is you can't just make ChatGPT a showrunner. I think there's always going to be the need for a human to curate what comes out of the model. So could it potentially, enhance or grow the roles? I think we have yet to see that. I think, what Marty, you said about, questions around IP and sort of the legality around it, I think that's going to be a big piece. But I do want to sort of counter with another article that I saw just yesterday in the Atlantic called "Prepare for the Text Apocalypse." So GPT and other large language models, they are trained on what kind of content is out on the internet. And the more sort of LLM produced content that we end up with out on the internet, we end up with this sort of like self-feeding cycle. And it does make me question like whether or not we have a degradation of quality in the content that it can produce. And would that potentially start to seep into entertainment use cases? I could imagine so.
Yeah, no, complete agreement. And you're right about humans needing to stay in the mix. If I ask ChatGPT, give me a new episode of Star Trek Next Generation, and in the first paragraph, it talks about the Enterprise blowing up, I would say, ChatGPT, delete yourself. Yeah, and I don't know, who knows what it would say in response to that. But yeah, your point's well taken. JP, coming to you. We're in a strange era with ChatGPT. Good for media and entertainment or bad?
Yes, I agree with what Greg was mentioning about ChatGPT being used as a tool for enabling creative people to develop content. And to answer the question, I don't think ChatGPT is a threat for the creative industry, but the next version, let us call it, say, Creative GPT. Instead of chat, we use a new version of GPT, which say right now GPT is trained. I mean, there is a layer of reinforcement learning which is used, correct? And for reinforcement learning, what the GPT team has done is actually used humans to pick from or reorder the answers which GPT has given, and that's how they have trained it. Imagine we replace those humans with real creative people. So the creative insights in picking up the right answer would go into the model, and then the model would be optimized, and we can call, I mean, I'm sure that is how more and more different types of GPT based models would come out in the future for creative industry, for a travel industry, or for various other industries. You'll have different models, and those will do a better job than what ChatGPT is doing. And that, I believe, could be a threat. I wouldn't call it as a threat. It is more a better tool than what ChatGPT is today for the creative people.
That's interesting. Yeah, so it's interesting to ponder what comes next with all of this, rather than just talking about what's present. Daniel, I'm coming to you. Same question. ChatGPT good for media entertainment or not?
Yeah, I think there's layers to it for sure. Just on a personal level, I'm very excited for, the relationship between AI and all sorts of creative tasks to sort of grow, because I think creativity is basically poorly understood in humans. And I think there's been this kind of underground effort for a long time to sort of, recreate the human brain with, AI algorithms. I mean, neural nets are, largely based on, what we think the brain is like. And so I'm hoping we do get some insights into creativity from AI. That'd be pretty cool. From a tangible impact perspective, I think even if the AI tools were made exactly as they are, which will almost certainly not happen, you have a helpful automation tool for writing a script, right? And they say good writing is often good editing. So I think at a base level, we already have like a juggling of tasks. Is that a threat? I don't know. I mean, I think, one other salient question, in this debacle is that, once AI starts, inventing things, basically, which is already happening, you have this intellectual property thing, as someone else mentioned, I think, that needs to be addressed. And now you probably need a bunch of lawyers, human lawyers, to work through that, right? Because I don't think we're going to trust, bots to think about that. And the legal field is often one where people talk about, disruption being unhelpful for jobs and positions. So it's a good example of how, one neighboring field, like a little bit of change and sort of new tasks being ascribed to bots, ends up creating a new field with more work to be done by humans. So anyway.
So you've gone from savoring and relishing the love of big tech to now wanting to give more and more work to attorneys. Okay, so I see how this is going.
Oh wait, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. And no, Chris, I'm going to give you the last word. Super interesting piece. ChatGPT, good or bad for media?
So I'll plug there's a game that came out recently called Pentiment. And I would highly recommend it because it is a it's set in the medieval period, right at the inflection point of the printing press becoming popular. And the protagonist is an illuminator. He's an artist who makes money by illuminating ancient texts, the way of publishing books, at the time. It is fascinating, the parallels between the sort of what's captured in that game and sort of what we're seeing with this conversation specifically. I think it'll end up, the industry will adapt. What I suspect is that it's going to make real human content more expensive. And I love old books. This is a book from 1871. It is leather bound. It has, the sort of like gold leaf. It has gorgeous paper. It has these lithograph prints. To get the same book today, this is a book that was printed in like 2015. This is over $250 because they don't run a book of this quality for mass printing. What you get is something like this with a dust jacket, and you can see it's kind of already like falling apart. What I think is going to happen is that there will be tiers of available content that you'll have, fully AI generated, you'll have partially AI generated, and then you'll have all human, and you're going to pay more to get a verified bona fide novel from Stephen King versus Stephen King written by Chris Morrow, adapted with assistance from novel writer GPT.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I'm actually in complete agreement with that. And spoken like a true Amazon employee, I might add, with all the books at your ready. Look, great episode, great job, great comments from the panel. Thanks to all of you for giving your time, sharing your experience and expertise with not just me, but the audience as well. It's greatly appreciated. For season 8, episode 8 of This Week in Voice, thank you for listening on your podcast provider of choice, watching if you're watching us on YouTube. Until next time.